Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and Dr. Jonathan is joining us today. So we will have discussion with Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Sasha. I'm glad to be here as always, and glad that you don't have to just sit here all by yourself and entertaining the audience
Exactly.
with finger puppets and tales of dying Russians and all that other good stuff.
Yeah. So the summit in between Russian and U.S. Ukrainian delegation is over yesterday. We don't know when the next discussions will happen. So what's your impression? What's going on?
Right now, it's political. Right now, I would tend to share your assessment that right now this is political theater.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for something more significant to happen. I am projecting that, again, because I don't know everything that goes on behind the scenes, but it is, if I'm looking at what the Ukrainians are probably doing, the Ukrainians are probably quite busy preparing yet another surprise for our Russian friends, so shall we say, and not a pleasant one. And so they are going to, I am still sticking to my earlier assessment that the Ukrainians are preparing a significant counterblow, that time to get with better weather in the spring, because they don't want to necessarily go against the elements, and they don't want to necessarily lose the element of surprise, but they are still basically hanging. They are right now at the moment perfectly content to extract higher casualties from the Russian army, steadily weakening their capacity. There is no sign of the Russians getting any stronger relative to the Ukrainians than they have been over the past year, really the past year. So right now the Ukrainians do have in fact time on their side because they are building up and the Russians are steadily weakening. And the Russians continue their terror attacks on the Ukrainian population because really there's not much else they can do. They cannot force a military decision on the Ukrainian army, and they cannot. Apparently, they are unable to persuade the Russians. Are certainly not able to persuade either the Europeans or the Americans to side with them and actively force Ukraine to a peace. Although they would certainly like to be able to do so, and there is a lot of political posturing going on. There's a lot of political maneuvering. Diplomatic maneuvering behind the scenes, political posturing in public, so as to try to gain support from their respective populations. And right now we are in a waiting period. But I would contend that time in this case is in fact on Ukraine's side.
Yes, Jonathan, I agree with you. And it seems to me I was studying quite a lot all recent Zelensky's interview and comments, and the way he talks, I can make one something. What makes sense to me is that Zelensky was told by Trump or his advisors, it doesn't matter. Okay, all what you do, you have to show up, say that you don't agree to lend all the Donbass to Russians, and come back. Whatever is the next round, you come back and say the same thing. You don't change anything, and you don't listen even to Russians what they have to say. Just say you disagree to give. Apparently, it's very easy to do because according to Ukrainian constitution, Even if you say, okay, I agree, I'll give you not only Donbass, I'll give you Zaporizhia, I'll give you half of the Kiev or all Kiev if you need.
They're not allowed to do it.
Anyway, so in fact, he can sign any agreement and it will be immediately null and void. So you don't have to even sign anything. Comes there, oh, what did you say? Oh, you want Donbass? Sorry, can't do that. What else? Anything else you want to tell me that I don't know? Oh, okay, bye bye. And every time, every week, every month, every 2 weeks, whatever time comes there, and that's exactly what's happened. That's what
Yeah.
on all latest summits, that's exactly what he said. No, Ukraine does not agree to give you the Donbas territories. That's it. So there is no need to discuss the guarantees of Ukraine from whether it's a US guarantees or European or anything else, because all those guarantees click in after the peace was agreed.
Okay.
It's not
Right
there.
now, right now at this point, they have figured out that if Russia continues its military operations, or if Ukraine is able to inflict unspoken, if they're able to inflict a decisive operational defeat on the Russian army, thus forcing them essentially to retreat, that will be its own security guarantee, de facto, not agreed to, but circumstances will force it upon them. So right now, that appears to be a calculation. This is there. We are in effect, by going through this and continuing to disagree and continue not continue to make any concessions. We're simply saying, okay, we can afford to wait. Time is on our side, not yours.
Exactly, exactly. So the war of attrition turned around completely. And
Yes.
Ukraine now got a very, very strong ally in the face of Sweden. Sweden is providing absolutely incredible level of arms and weapons to Ukraine, including this Gripen fighters and many missiles that actually are unique in its way because no other country is producing them. So they are, first of all, Sweden is becoming in the first tier of military suppliers. And furthermore, they have Ukrainian army which will actually test all these new weapons. So
So
that I
Sweden
don't,
has so Sweden has a free test bed. They have a
yeah, yeah.
free ally who's willing to test the effectiveness of all their weapons, and the Swedes get the luxury of seeing how all of their wonderful new weapons actually work in practice.
Exactly.
And
So they will encourage
it,
Russians to continue their attacks to
right.
show the effectiveness of their new weapons.
And if they prove to work as specified, and the Ukrainians then say, "Oh, they work beautifully. Can you give us more?" And the Swedes say, "Why, certainly."
Not only give more, but even maybe produce some of this equipment in
Or
Ukraine.
maybe the Swedes will even transfer the knowledge to the Ukrainians for them to produce those on their own. Again,
Yeah,
it's a win-win for Ukraine and Sweden.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And so in this case, this is one of those things you like to see happen in a war of attrition, where the quality of your weapons and equipment, they don't even have to at this point produce promised manpower, because the Ukrainians have elevated their drone production to such a level. 2.5 million drones per year? My heavens. That and it is it's Hollywood could not have imagined this. I mean, the closest that Hollywood has ever come is that they have movies like the old movies like The Terminator, with the machines taking over and fighting and trying to eliminate humanity. But in this case, now you've got Ukraine armed, having essentially an army of robots, of all types, doing supplies as well as combat, and basically it's an army of robots fighting the Russians, and which is why the uh, casualty levels continue to accelerate for the Russians.
Very interesting. If Ukraine were able to close the skies for this Russian terrorist bombardments, and Russians absolutely cannot move even an inch against Ukrainian army on the front lines, then why Ukraine would be hurry up sign any peace
No,
agreement with Russians? What's
no,
the name?
we'll just sit here and watch you collapse.
Yeah,
If,
it's coming. The collapse of
yeah,
Russia is coming. Oh, yesterday was a great day, Jonathan.
yeah,
No, yesterday,
indeed.
on February
Enlighten me.
5th, this treaty between US and Russia about long-term missiles collapsed. It's finished. It's no more there. So the only greatest thing what Russia had going for, it's a parity with United States in strategic missiles and missiles and warheads is gone now.
Yep.
So, by the way, Russia for some time doesn't allow inspection of its sites.
Yeah.
And the suspicion is they don't even have the minimum 1,500 what's been allowed. They don't have that.
Right.
They may have much less than that, but
They
because
may not have, because we know about their lack of ability and logistical capability, and probably that extends to maintenance as
yeah,
well. So, and because we know that there's a significant level of corruption in the Russian system, they may well fear that allowing on-site inspection would enable the Americans to see, oh, you have considerably few, you might, as you might guess, considerably fewer weapons than you have. It reminds me of back in the late 1950s when when the Soviets first tested their long-range intercontinental ballistic missile, and Khrushchev engaged in what later came to be known by some historians as the period of strategic bluffing by Khrushchev.
yeah.
Khrushchev was made great display of saying, "Oh, we are producing ICBMs like sausages. We are having more." And the implication was, unless you agree to our demands, we will produce even more ICBMs. And at the time, at least publicly, we did not have a means of calling their bluff or verifying that. But because of our U-2 overflights, those high altitude flights, we were able to penetrate Soviet airspace. And later, uh, President Lyndon Johnson said, when we saw those, we realized that our fears were groundless. We were harboring fears that we did not need to harbor, because the U-2 overflights verified that instead of having dozens or even hundreds of ICBMs ready for launch, by 1960, they discovered that the U-2s revealed that the Soviets had six ICBMs on launch pads, and they were not in silos. They were all above ground. 6 missiles, all above ground, and it was estimated that they would require us an entire day to prepare to launch them. So, in fact, as weird as it may sound, our bomber force could have struck their ICBMs. If we decided to strike first, we could have taken out all 6 of their intercontinental ballistic missiles above ground before they would even be prepared to launch them. The bombers would reach them first, take them out. No capability whatsoever to strike the United States, except through essentially one-way missions at high altitude, using their Tu-4 bombers at high altitude, and those would be almost, it's a suicide mission, because we had our high altitude air defense weapons are the Nike Zeus. These were the anti-aircraft missiles armed with nuclear warheads. The concept's very simple. You simply detonate one of those in the middle of a bunch of incoming bombers, and poof, no more bombers. Would work very well. About the only thing we would have had to worry about was electromagnetic pulse. But since it's not above the atmosphere, it would have less electromagnetic pulse to worry about. And we decided that was a worthwhile risk to assume. So in any case, the combination of intelligence and not falling for the other side's bluff, Putin has, we both know, has been brandishing his nuclear arsenal, his allegedly superior nuclear arsenal, in the face of the Western allies, trying to capitalize on the Western fear of nuclear escalation. And because we basically, the previous administration was somewhat intimidated by that bluff. The current administration, Trump administration, apparently not at all intimidated by it, but instead they're countering by saying, oh, we're going to construct the Golden Dome. We're going to neutralize those long range nuclear weapons. And the Russians and the Chinese are increasingly, there's been evidence on the Chinese side, they've had a purge and some other things because there's corruption on their side too. Their nuclear missiles, a lot of their nuclear missiles had been cannibalized, so to speak, the nuclear material taken from them. So the Chinese, although they don't have anywhere near the ICBMs that Russia or the United States have, they apparently do not have as many as they claim to have. So there's all of this is working to the favor of not only Ukraine, but to the United States and the West. And especially if they are able to go through it to any extent with the so called Golden Dome project and reach what I call initial operational capability. Not the capability to block everything, but the capability to block enough to make it, another very, very unlikely that the Russians or Chinese would attempt a nuclear first strike on the United States.
Yeah, it's just an issue of just being there.
Yeah.
That's a very, very strong argument. Now, yesterday were also calls between Putin and Emperor Xi, and then later on Trump between him and Emperor Xi. So between Putin and Xi, that's easy what's going on because the Putin is a vassal of China, and they're going to do everything what China will tell them to do. Now between the U.S. and China, it's a little bit different. And I saw actually almost contradictory accounts of that call. One of them that Trump was very aggressive and says that, look, I will allow you to exist without any worries. Just tell your friend stop the war in Ukraine. Forget about attacking Taiwan, and you can operate. I will not harm you anymore, and so on, and be happy and enjoy. Now, another account was that it was Emperor Xi who was telling Trump what to do and what not to do, and what you're making out of it? Have you heard anything about
both it is reasonable that both sides would be attempting to persuade the general public and the world at large that it is the superior power, allowing the other side to exist. And so, but Emperor Xi is trying to save face. He wants to save face. He does not want to be perceived as weak, declining, even though if you look from some outside sources, China has, in the same way that Russia has, a very severe demographic problem.
Yes.
The Russians have a declining population, which some observers have said may well result in the disappearance of Russia virtual disappearance of Russia as a nation state by the end of the 21st century. It's on a downward trajectory. China has a similar problem, declining population. A population has been, in fact, declining for the past several years. Largely as a result, it's a self-inflicted wound. They insisted on this one-child policy, a policy which, in effect, guaranteed that eventually China would have a declining and aging population. And it is going to proceed. It is very difficult for them to reverse it at this point. Even if the Emperor Xi were to go up to make a solemn declaration, all eligible and fertile Chinese must now reproduce at an incredible rate, and that is an order from your leader. There's only so much that can be done. The numbers are not in their favor. So, and interestingly enough, the United States itself, in its native population, has reached the such a static, but it is as a result of the illegal immigrants that have been allowed in that the United States population is still increasing, and yet so the United States is certainly not going to, I predict, try to expel all illegal immigrants. They are trying to expel the worst of the illegal immigrants, the criminal elements, get rid of those elements which are clearly not desirable, and then try to this administration and subsequent administrations will be trying to, in a sense, work a deal to create a path for the illegal immigrants to become legal immigrants and provide an outlet through what will hopefully be a growing and vibrant U.S. economy by cutting regulations and cutting taxes and trying to stimulate growth in all ways. That will be a fascinating process to watch, because the United States will have essentially a growing population, but not be facing the real long term burden of a declining population. Fascinating to watch.
There is very interesting point, John. And I saw just a couple of days ago a program on American TV where they were saying that the studies were done that immigrants, both legal and illegal, they contribute enormous amount of tax payments to U.S. government. And I'll tell you why. Because being immigrant myself in Canada, though, the immigrants who just coming to a new country, whether Canada or United States, especially more United States because they have more influx of Latin American immigrants. Canada is different in that respect. Canada has probably more people from Pakistan, India than Latin America. Because Latin Americans are not stupid. Why would to be in such a cold climate as Canada? So they're going to the United States, which is the right choice for them. So at first, they're all, both in Canada and the United States, they're hard-working people who want to make life in a new country for themselves, their families, and so on. So they're very hard-working. They're taking almost any jobs. They're paying income taxes in full in both countries and so on.
Right.
Now, once, let's see, 10 and most likely 20 years later, they are becoming Americanized.
Right.
They are now hiring all these tax lawyers. They are no longer paying their taxes in full, and they're using all the loopholes. And they evade taxes and all that stuff. So you need influx immigrants who are just coming, hardworking, honest people,
Right.
not 20 years later when they're becoming Americanized and they're no longer hardworking or honest or anything.
Well, they would be able to, the only thing there is that they would be able to evade taxes once they reach a high enough income level to where they can afford the tax lawyers to enable
Yes.
them to find all the loopholes. Because the IRS, keep in mind, what is the most efficient tax collection system in the history of humanity is the Internal Revenue Service.
Agreed.
No other nation has ever had the ability to collect and extract taxes as had the Internal Revenue Service. It is the most efficient. As a matter of fact, the Internal Revenue System at one point, you may be aware of the American gangster Al Capone back in the 1930s.
Yes.
You know, the IRS was responsible for catching Al Capone. And you know how they did it? They didn't get it because of his criminal activities. They did it indirectly. On the income tax form as it existed back then, there was a question. Every American had to answer it when they filed their taxes. There was a line on the old 1040 that said, "Do you have any illegal income?" This is the perfect catch-22.
Absolutely.
If you say, "Yes, I have illegal income,"
then tell us what it is.
Please tell us where it is. And then thank you for paying your taxes on your illegal income. You'll be visited by our law enforcement people since you just confessed to having illegal income. If you say, "No, I do not have illegal income," and the IRS looks around, does it with its usual thoroughness, it says, "You seem to have sources of illegal. You are guilty of tax evasion." And that's how they caught Al Capone. Al Capone said, "No, I do not have any illegal income." And the law enforcement said, "Oh, yes, he does." And they got him. They had the evidence. "You have violated the law. You are guilty of tax evasion." So that's how they got him. So the Internal Revenue Service has a tax collection system that would have been the absolute envy of every king, emperor, dictator in prior human history. And that very efficient tax collection system helped fuel the effort by the United States in World War II to become the history's most powerful war machine, to to a degree which is still staggering to any American who studies what extent the Americans became this super powerful war machine, especially even in the production of food. Yeah, at one point, at its peak, the American farmers and American food production was such that they could feed technically half of all of the people in the world at that time. And even now, today, even now we have, I don't know if we can feed half the people in all the world now, but we can still feed an awful lot, and it's still one of our biggest exports. And we can certainly do a better job of it. We can produce better food. We can I would argue we really should stop producing junk food. Just phase that out and go and produce some kind of food that everyone would like, and not just for the thrill of ease, for the ease of having junk food, but just food that would be good for children, and so forth, and good for the entire population. But anyway, that's
John, I have a quick question coming back to
sure.
immigrant issue. I always wondered, let's see, if you take two immigrants, one is legal, one is illegal. They're both working in similar positions, say on a farm or some production facilities, somewhere, making about the same amount of money, paying taxes, have houses or renting something, sending children to school, and so on. So, what's the really difference between legal immigrant in this case and illegal? In my opinion, the difference is only that the legal one paid $10,000 to a lawyer who filled up the blanks or so on and submitted the paper, and another one saved $10,000 for his family to buy a car and somehow to improve the conditions. So maybe later on he can still hire that lawyer and pay maybe not 10,000, 12,500 because he was late or something, and fill up all these papers or so on and legalize. What's your opinion? What's the
the
difference?
the the difference here is essentially intent. If you come in here without, we've had for oh, for well over a century, we have had established procedures. Here's where you come in. These are the procedures you must follow. If you play by the rules and you come in and we know that you want to become a citizen of this country, we have established procedures which will allow you to become a legal citizen of this country. You go through stages, you get a green card, you are you have that protected legal status. And so that we are aware that you are trying to become a citizen of this country and you're not just visiting, or you're not just trying to, bum a free ride or anything like that. But if you do not go through these procedures, then it must be assumed by the government that you do not want us to know that you are here on other than a legal basis, and therefore we must assume that your intent is not as good as the person who is willing to play by the rules and go through the system in a proper way. So when you had that many illegal immigrants, presumably allowed and encouraged by the previous administration to come into this country, uh, going outside the system, but just coming into the country, this current administration has assumed that they have to assume that a lot of these illegal immigrants do not have good intentions, do not have any intention of assimilating or becoming a productive member of society in the United States. And so they have to assume that, and especially if these illegal immigrants have criminal records, they say,
That's a
these are the,
different story. The criminal record is a different story. If
yeah,
anybody did legal or illegal criminal activity, that's completely out of
right.
question.
If they have not yet committed any kind of crime, but instead are working, okay, this forms a gray area. Okay, so the priority of the administration is first get rid of all of the obviously criminal, illegal, counterproductive, harmful immigrants that would be doing harm to American citizens. Get rid of them first. Then you have to turn our attention to what I call this gray area. Okay, they are illegal, but are they hostile? We don't know. We have to then proceed because there are so many of them. We have to go through this in a very methodical manner, but we have to prioritize. So that is pretty much so. It's a question of time. The longer this takes place, we get rid of all the criminal elements and harmful elements. first. Then we turn our attention to that existing body of illegal immigrants that are still producing and working, and we have to treat them on a case by case basis. We then approach them and say, all right, do you wish to become a legal immigrant citizen of this country? We put the question to them and methodically go through it. And this is a process that will take years. And it may well be. Now, we could offer, I would propose, we could offer to a number of these illegal immigrants a easier path to citizenship by offering them, if you wish to join the armed forces, volunteer for our armed forces. That would be the science fiction author Robert Heinlein, who wrote the novel Starship Troopers and a number of others. He asserted that the requirement for citizenship should be military service, that all those who wish to become citizens of this country, whether they're native born or not, should go through a period of military service, voluntary, for a certain minimum number of years to demonstrate that they are in fact loyal citizens of the United States.
Should that be applicable to President of the United States too?
So again,
Should that be requirement to prove?
Under Heinlein's system, everyone, including those who would wish to be president of the United States, would have to go through military service. So but now if you could apply this system now, and that would be not only a very good way of testing the sincerity of the would-be immigrants or citizens of the United States to become legal and productive citizens, but it would also give them an opportunity. The military is very good, especially the U.S. military, is very good at teaching skills, a wide variety of skills, not just military's combat skills, but they also can teach you how to be a cook, how to be a lawyer, how to be a dentist, the whole range, because the military is its own economy, its own society. It requires a wide variety of skills, and the military is very good at teaching the basics of all of these skills to its soldiers. You can be a combat arms soldier, infantry, artillery, tanks, armor, air defense artillery. That's combat arms. Then you have combat support arms, such as what I was. I was an intelligence officer, military intelligence, and basically which support the combat arms. And then you have combat service support arms. These are the ones who do administration. These are the ones who do finance. They handle the money. They do all the things that would be associated with civilian society. Combat service support, again, it's just the whole range of skills that you would find in American society at large, you will find in the military. They have their equivalent.
And that would be a good trampoline to your future advancement in life, and maybe a path to higher education.
Yes.
And many other applicable virtues.
Yes. You could get your law degree by becoming a military lawyer.
Yeah.
And that would transition easily into civilian life. You could become a dentist. You could become a dentist or a doctor in the military, and that in turn would transition into a useful and productive career in civilian life. So there, if applied diligently and fairly and consistently, all of these immigrants that are now illegal but not otherwise hostile to American way of life and so forth, can have a means of transitioning and being trained and become a useful, productive portion of American life, tax-paying. And there's no reason to worry about, do we have to get all of them out? The idea is get the worst of them out. Do that, then work diligently to incorporate the rest. And that would be a very good thing for the United States and for the world at large, really.
Yeah, Jonathan, thank you so much for clarifying a lot of this issues.
That's quite all right. There are a lot of unique twists and turns and characteristics of the American system that not even our own citizens are fully aware of. I mean, you would be surprised at how a lot of American students in American schools are not there. I'll tell you what. There was this one course. I'll tell you this one that I used to, that existed when I was in high school. It was called Problems in American Democracy. I
Mhm.
was in the state of Florida. This course, and there were variations of it all over the United States. This course was required of every high school student in the United States at the time. Problems in American Democracy talked about basic economics, supply and demand. They also had a section on Americanism versus communism. You learned about Marxism, you learned about socialism, you learned all of those things. And my high school teacher, Mr. Filippello, when we walked into his class on the first day, he gave all of us students the final exam.
Hmm.
There was purpose behind it. He made us all take the final exam on the first day of class, and then after we took it, and then the next day or so, he displayed the results on an overhead projector and showed who scored, who missed how many questions in what category. This was intended to show the class this is how much you need this class. This is how many questions you missed without how much you need to learn. Now, there was one student over in the far left hand column. Essentially, this student had missed just a handful of questions. And I said, now this student basically made an A for the course on the final exam. That was me.
Oh,
He,
wow.
he,
Well
he,
done, Jonathan.
he turned to me, he looked at me and said in front of all the other students, says, Jonathan, you do not need to take this course. And so the other students were all, oh my God, it's super brain. But no, I had been doing a lot of reading, on my own on various essays, which is
Of
what you're free
course.
to do. And so I had the freedom to, is that I could select any other elective that I wanted to take, and
So,
just
didn't he offer you to become his assistant in this course?
that way. Now, looking back on a what if, I could have asked for. There were awards that were being given to various students in various academic disciplines, and I could have. I didn't really think about it. I was just glad. Okay, that's one more class I don't need to take. I could have asked for his, shall we say, political support, and along with my American history teacher, because I was allowed to teach some of his classes on military history, and I had the means to do so. And I could have asked for several of those teachers, asked for their political support to nominate me for an award for social studies, which was a special school award. And had I been really inclined to been aware of the nature of that award, I would ask for their political support. And I could have, gotten a nice high school recognition. But the point
Okay.
of it is that this course, this required course, Problems in American Democracy, is apparently no longer taught. And that's a big problem right there. And what I would recommend is that this course can be reconstituted. It's easy to rebuild and reteach. I mean, Fox News and other networks have all sorts of experts who know fully about all the elements of the course, Problems of American Democracy. And you can produce a high school level of it. You can produce a middle school level of the course. And you can do this all the way down. And that course would be very useful, and it would be very beneficial to the American people as a whole, especially for future American generations. So that is but I am amazed at the things which we have forgotten that need to still be taught, that we could still do today, and we could do it into the future because it's not going to lose its relevance.
When I was still a student in Soviet Union, there was a required class in university, the political system of capitalism. It was a continuation of Marxism, Leninism, and there was something new that was developed maybe around Stalin's time, or maybe a little bit, maybe after Second World War. I think it was still in Stalin's time developed. So the course was about deficiencies of capitalistic system. So, so the teacher of that course, he would start with the first of all, he would ask student, what is a real American invention? Then she would help saying that it's a food item. So everybody's thinking, what's the food item? Maybe hamburger, maybe what else? No, no, no. I'll tell you what it is. It's a bagel. Bagel is American
Bagel?
invention? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is exactly an example of capitalistic thinking. So the rich people getting the bagel, and poor people are getting the the middle of the bagel, which is nothing.
The whole, right? They get the bagel.
Yeah, the whole. That's what poor
If you really want to be, if you wanted an example of an American food, pizza.
it's Italian though.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
no,
okay.
not the version that eventually they sort
Yes.
of borrowed from the concept and they Americanized it,
Yeah.
and the hamburger would of course be an American invention, and there are quite a number, but that's the fascinating thing. There are now on the History Channel. There are now programs which talk about the history of development of certain kinds of food, how we got these certain kinds of food, and the competition that existed in the capitalist system on how to develop the best kinds of food. And it's fascinating to watch. But in any case, there are just numerous examples of how the American electorate can be better educated to understand their own history, as well as the challenges to the American system, the American political system. So this would be a fascinating subject, and of course the Ukrainians, for their part, they are teaching the American military some unique lessons. We
Mm.
actually have some things that we can learn from the Ukrainians, which will make the American military's performance better in future wars, or maybe even give us the opportunity to avoid or to be able to prevent the occurrence of future wars with any kind of decent luck and blessing from God for the remainder of the 21st century. Now that would be a worthwhile achievement.
Yes, Jonathan, thank you so much for today's program. I think we covered a lot of grounds,
Oh
including
yes,
food. And in my example, the food became very political. The bagel, who could think of that? It's a very political food.
shall I declare myself a revolutionary? Fly to Moscow brandishing a bagel
Yeah,
with cream cheese, and,
cream cheese and Lux on
yeah, there
top.
you go, lox and bagels. That's
Yeah,
perfect.
that's not so bad after all. Okay, Jonathan, have a great weekend and
You do
all
the
our
same.
listeners. And we'll see you Tuesday, same place, same time.
Excellent.
Glory to Ukraine and
God
US
bless America,
and
and God bless Ukraine.
friends.
We will leave Russia out of the equation for now until they learn their lesson.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks a lot and see you on Tuesday. Bye bye.